Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and this is the Eve Universe Show's continued coverage of the CSM 17, this time with Arsia Elkin. How's it going?
It's going well. Thank you for having me on.
So, I know you pretty well. If anybody's been delving through my archives recently, trying to figure out the lore, they probably know you as well. You ran last year.
I did.
And didn't make it on.
I almost made it on.
And yet, you're now an incumbent.
Yeah, I had to show up at Pro God Legend's house and no, that's a joke.
Did you buy him skis? I heard he went to the slopes.
Yeah, it's like I sent him snowboarding. If you know what? No, I'm joking. I'm totally joking. I hope he's having a great time.
But how long have you been on the CSM then?
So since January, so almost half a term, about half a term I'll have served.
Right. Okay. So
it was an eventful half a term though.
I imagine it was. But so that's why you're running again because you've been on, and yet that's just a taste, right? That's unfair.
So it's not to get the reason why I'm running again isn't necessarily just because I've been on and because I didn't get a full term or anything like that. The reason why I am looking to run again is because with the FanFest announcements being what they were, so heavily focused on faction warfare and storyline arcs driving the lore, it was my platform for CSM 16. That was exactly I got everything in my platform in half a term. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying I was quite effective, and I want to continue to be here as the stuff is actually implemented to give my input.
Man,
that is my main motivator for running again for CSM. If there was no faction warfare announcement at FanFest, I probably wouldn't be running again. But it's literally my ideas coming into the game, so I want to be in the room.
That is quite the card to lay on the table.
I'm not saying I'm the only person who's ever pushed for a front line or the only person who's ever pushed for any of these things. A lot of people agree on a lot of stuff when it comes to what changes faction warfare need. But this is literally what I put in my CSM 16 platform, and I got it.
Sure, yeah. And so without breaking NDA, though, how much do you feel like this was a coincidence that it just happened to be that CCP was looking this direction right as you managed to miracle your way onto ascend Jamil style to the CSM? Was this a confluence of things, or did one cause the other?
So I have no way of reading the minds at CCP, but I have a feeling that faction warfare has been something they've been wanting to get back to for a while because there's been such an outcry about it. And I think situations like the Flossiswin War and the war last year in Pochven and the war in the Becca before that and many other such situations that started with RPers doing RP things and igniting a gigantic war caught their attention, and they realized that they can tie a lot of this to faction warfare and an update to the allegiance system. And all of the ducks kind of fell in a row that way. I think that my decent performance in last CSM might have been something that showed that people are interested in both faction warfare and the Eve universe as a story,
the living universe,
the living universe as a content driver,
right? Catalyst for things. Okay, yeah. No, that makes sense.
Sole savior of everything, but I think I had an effect both before and after I was on CSM in these ideas coming to fruition, as did many other people, and I want to keep being in the room.
Right. Yeah. So you kind of dropped a couple of names that I'm sure a fair chunk of the audience doesn't know very much about, with Flozaswin and Thebeka. Just briefly, as an example of the kind of things that you're talking about, can you tell us a little bit more about one or the other, whichever one you find
All
more
right.
interesting?
So they're both very interesting, and I can give a little bit about both, I think.
Sure.
Um, so Flosiswin was a large war in the low security system of Flosiswin in the Amar Minmatar faction warfare war zone. Uh, Basically, there was an agreement between the Amar and the Minmatar militias to hand over uh, each of their missioning systems, the systems with TLF and 24IC, the two
Right.
militia NPC corps
The
stations of
collusion.
the stations of those corporations. So every system with a 24IC station would be handed to the Minmatar militia, and every station with a TLF station outside of the ones in high sec, of course, would be handed to the Amar militia,
And that
and
locks out
that was
missions.
yeah, that makes it a lot less profitable for the mission farmers that currently kind of run the war zone. There's a lot of like farmers and like flexing bots and stuff like that that kind of control the tides of faction warfare in its current iteration because it really makes lucrative switching between the sides and manipulating LP values, basically.
Right.
And so a lot of people do that to make tons of ISK without ever contributing to the PvP infrastructure, like not infrastructure, the PvP like environment, the ecosystem is the word I was looking for. But I think it's within these missions. You basically do it in insta warp ships with good range. The NPCs defend the people killing them. They'll shoot their own side. Basically, it's really hard to go around and kill these mission runners. They don't affect system control. They have like plexing
Right.
characters that do that.
Right.
But basically, the missions as they are a problem. Um, and
CCP
two
Aurora said as
militias
much.
collude. Yeah, the two militias colluded. The RPers, obviously, from like an RP perspective, collusion a bit between the militias is grr. So RPers were just like RPing about it, and in a thread I started, ironically enough, and then CCP Delegate Zero posted with an NPC saying that the Amar did not stand for this collusion, and they're going to do a full reclaiming of the planet of Flosis for um, and urge the Amar to go take Flosis and urge them to make sure the Minmatar don't take Arzad. So basically, putting a target for the targets on Flosis and Arzad, and the idea of a full reclaiming of Flosis which is literal slave taking in the war zone, something that hasn't been done up to this point. It was actually something that was shot down years and years and years ago when some of the Amar royal heirs were suggesting the same thing. That has come to pass now, and that got everybody's attention, and everybody started going hard for Flosis Win. A lot of the RPers, and
Right.
as people as like the deal kind of like ended, and a lot of the corporations that signed on to it lost members and went inactive. The war zone quieted down for a bit. Flosis Wind started to heat up, and it basically like revived the entire area as like everybody RP or not like piled into it. Um, Not everybody. Like some people were like, "I'm staying out of Flosis Wind because I don't agree with this," or but a lot of people piled into it, and it lasted for months and months and months and months, and it's still like a hot button
I'd about to
target
say, I'd
today.
argue that it's still ongoing.
There's still like news stories about it. There's not like an active siege in One like there was for months
That's
though.
fair.
Right. But yeah,
They're focused on Fortress Asset now.
it was probably it was easily one of the biggest like long term back and forth sieges in faction
Right.
warfare since it came out. Right. There.
You're using this. This is an example of like this was kind of improvised or ad hoc and this is an example of what kind of thing they're looking to build tools to be able to do, basically.
And like, yeah, and like the beautiful thing about this is like a lot of people worry about when they hear lore as a content driver, they worry that sand is going to be taken out of the sandbox and it'll be moved towards some like theme park sort of thing. But something like this shows that that doesn't have to be the case if it's done right. Like
Right.
the Amar Empire pushed people who were loyal to them, who chose to be loyal to them, to go and take the system. But you didn't have to do that. Like you could do whatever you want. You could push against them, you could push for them, you could show up and kill everybody, and a lot of people did just that. Eve players were free to do whatever they wanted, like they always do, except a lot more people were suddenly in space in this area. And a lot more
Right.
people being suddenly in space is kind of a good thing for literally everybody in the game.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and then basically what they would be doing is, or what it seems like they're doing is that they're building tools to, I guess, legitimize that, right? Because like Frontlines kind of creates a little bit of that concept, the campaign idea, or like, I can't remember what they called it. They didn't call it campaigns, but basically, they can put targets on a specific system. It sounds to me like basically Flossiswin was almost like a prototype, almost like a prototype for what they're going into.
So pure speculation is that Flosis Win started with like Delegate Zero having some fun,
Mm-hmm.
and then he basically slammed it on somebody's desk and said, "Look what this can do.
Right.
If you give me a little, like, look what this kind of stuff can do," and everybody's like, "Whoa." That's kind of like my speculation. Like it's based on nothing besides just pulling it out of thin air, right? But that's what I expect happened.
I would also like to believe that me making a big deal about Intaki and then showing that I can make it the most deadliest
Yeah,
system, like
Intaki was kind of
single-handedly.
like the attempt for the other Warzone,
Yeah.
and that got some good content too. It wasn't quite as large as Plus this one, but Intaki was definitely a hot button system
Well, they
too.
got us during the
Yeah,
Minotaur Liberation Day, and
yeah,
I was conflicted. No, any
yeah,
rate, but so you talk about that sand out of the sandbox thing.
yeah.
There are people that obviously have that fear that sees this as story driven content that like one of the big fears or one of the things that people talk about is like the misconception that Pochven, the formation of Pochven was scripted, or like this idea that like, because historically every event that you can think of that you would have liked to have a choice, in the end there was no choice one
So
way or another. So
so there were choices and things like Felicity Win and the Becca. I think there was some mishandling of Pochven and Devs. Like during FanFest, they apologized for it. But I think they learned a lot
right.
from
Well,
that. And like,
I mean, like, there's
and
the
this is,
Stargates. There is, I mean, like, just historically, most of the time, there's an event to do a thing, but it's not like they're going to change what the thing is. Like,
yeah, yeah, because they don't want to throw away development time, based
well, the
usually,
the
right?
battle for Kaldari Prime was never going to end with the Titan not blowing up.
And Jamel was always going to get doomsday by the drifters.
Exactly. Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So, any rate, my point is that like, what do you say to those people that suggest that you represent what CCP should not be doing? That this is a bad idea. That this is just making it into scripted content. Blah blah blah.
because with something like Flosis, when either side could have won, or it could have just been overrun by neutrals, or it could have just not garnered much of a response at all, and that's all entirely up to the Eve players. Something like Jamel, something like uh, Kaldari Prime, were just like major storyline events that are going to be more or less forced. But I think this is not going to be so much about major storyline events all the time. It's never going to be like if the Kaldari say, "Go, we need you to go get Old Man Star or whatever." it's not going to be another the Battle of Caldari Prime, and CCP doesn't really have much reason to influence it besides what the players choose, you know?
Right.
Because this is going to be like an ongoing thing that switches, that kind of makes faction warfare not the same boring, unending war that we've had for 10 years plus. Because as things stand, faction warfare sits in a situation where a lot of people are just tired of feeling like what they've been working for isn't really accomplishing anything. And this gives like clear scenarios where there's a winner, there's a loser, and it allows you to, and it'll be allowing people to give rewards for extended periods of loyalty as opposed to flip flopping, and it'll allow people to move away from, it'll allow faction warfare to move away from the system where the missions are lucrative and the fighting is not, and flip that on its head. So the people fighting are the ones who get rewarded the most.
Right. Yeah, and I've said, and I think we've even talked about this before, that in faction warfare, the mechanics are actually quite good, right? The actual like plex fighting and the way that it all plays out over time and how they respawn and how the sieges play out, like it all actually is quite good. It's the
So
context
on a
that
micro
needs a lot
level,
of help.
it's on a micro level. It's really
Right.
good. Where like
That's what
you
I'm
have
saying. The
terrain
context, though, in
right?
which it plays
Yes,
out,
in the larger
that's what needs help.
context, it's.
Right.
I mean, there's still like small adjustments that need to be made. Like I think the larger complexes should be worth more than the smaller ones in like system control wise. Currently,
Mm.
they're just both
Yeah, they're all
point
the same.
0.7. Yeah. Like, but if you capture an open, it should be a little more than capturing a novice. It takes
Well,
longer. It requires a bigger investment.
and I don't want to get too far into the weeds. We might have to have you come back on and we can debate these things. But it actually plays out. I believe it's that way because that way, if all things being equal, big force brings in big ships, small force, like the people defending the system or like this whatever is in smaller ships. Them taking all of the smaller plexes will make it so that their side accumulates more, forcing the big ships to downship if they and take more plexes if they actually want to make real progress.
Yeah, but it like takes away fights in anything bigger than a destroyer. Like because they can just go, we don't need to even try to compete for the medium. We don't even need to try to compete for the large.
In practice,
When
I see plenty.
right.
Either way, all right. So, yeah,
I want
but
to. I would want it to be balanced so that people will try to compete for every single size.
I agree. Although, yeah, like I said, like even the things like the victory points and all that kind of stuff, that's all context, right? But the plexes themselves are really cool. That was my
Yeah,
the way
and
that
during FanFest, they also mentioned the possibility of the battleground sites, and those are probably the thing that excite me the most. Well, maybe not the most, but like they excite me a lot. Um, so the concept of the battleground sites in faction warfare will be uh, similar to a site similar to the flashpoints in Pochven and fortresses, where it's like soft capped, higher end fleet PVE that has a high chance of PvP happening. That's rewarding, hopefully, to replace the mission system as the biggest reward generator in faction warfare. Um, Basically, uh, the you would need a fleet of like 10 to 15 ships of like higher end quality, and you could get a lot of fights over these objectives, I think.
yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah. It sounds like it's going to be really cool, and obviously, I mean, like, I feel like we've almost just proven the point that you are the correct person to be on the CSM for this specific subject. I mean, it basically is your subject.
Well, yeah.
So you once were a Mar. You fought
Yes.
for Sorum, right?
Yeah, Arsia was a Saramite, and she was a member of Pi, which is Praetoria Imperialis Executorius.
Right, but you actually
Um,
fought for the
yeah.
Sorum family.
Yes, in the Yamar tournament, I was on Team Sarum.
Right. And now you're Mimitar.
Arsia defected. Yes, over Felicitoin actually.
If
Like
you're
Felicitoin was like the thing that broke the camel's back. The straw.
if you're willing to betray the Amar, how do you know that you're not going to betray us in the CSM? Like become a goon or something as soon as you become elected.
So you're asking about an RP choice versus an out of character. I'm trying to improve the game choice. Right?
I yes, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Right? Like, so
No,
it's
yeah,
like that's like going up to an actor in a movie. It's like in Dinglehopper 6, you murdered somebody.
yeah. It
How
was
do
it
we
was a
know? How do we know if we vote for you for senator? You're not going to shoot somebody in the face,
amazing.
right?
Um,
Like a actor running for senator or something.
so earlier, Fonsui in chat pointed out that there's actually a positive side to how much time you've been on the CSM. Because, like, you've been on the CSM just the right amount to have gotten all the paperwork done without having to get, like, totally jaded, like a lot of people do after their full, term of the CSM. What do you think about that?
I mean, that's a pessimistic outlook, but I feel like
I don't know. Fonsui's kind of a pessimistic dude
I
sometimes.
feel like after a couple years on the CSM, I probably would be like, maybe I take a term off, but maybe you're right. I'm not jaded yet. I mean, maybe that stands.
Fair enough. All right. And then so you aren't just about the lore though. You have well, you've done PvE experience, right?
I mean, I'm way more of a PvPer than a PvEer, but I PvE in context of RP goals. Like in the Triglavian invasions, I was obviously fighting for Edencom.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of killing NPCs and killing people who were killing the wrong NPCs and stuff like that.
That's right. You weren't in invasions until it was an outright conflict.
I mean, when they first, in chapter 1, I did some invasions with Lumen and such, and Lumen and Ired and those groups a little bit. I didn't really fight with Arc too much, a couple times maybe, but after a handful, like I did it every now and then, just if it was like invading a system that I was invested in, but I didn't go out of my way before chapter 3, which is when it became the full blown invasion, because the PvE content with no real PvP isn't really my thing for the most part, outside of like making good money, and I wasn't making it didn't make enough money for me to use my time with to fight PvE stuff.
Sure. So, but so then you do primarily PvP, thus breaking the notion that RPers don't do PvP. No.
So that notion is kind of crazy. I feel like most RPers are like small gang PvPers. Obviously, there's a mix. There's PvEers. There's like chat warriors. There's people in big blocks and stuff. But I feel like most RPers PvP in some way, and I feel like that's been true for a long time.
All right. Well, I don't. Okay. Yeah, I guess that is true. I hadn't really thought about it like that way.
There is, it's like weird prejudices against our peers, possibly because not in every other MMO, but in most other MMOs, the RP and the gameplay is very separate. If you go to Final Fantasy 14, the gameplay has you being the magical hero of light who's loved by all, and everybody has the same story, and you can't really incorporate the gameplay to your RP because everybody has to be somebody different.
Right.
And some people want to be criminals or this or that or the other thing. But in Eve, the gameplay is up to you to decide. There's not like you have to do this, you have to do that. And well, there might be things like empires want this to happen. You don't have to do it. You can tell them to screw off and go do whatever you want. And that should always be the case. but the gameplay being actually part of what the character is really the thing that makes Eve a fantastic medium for RP to me.
Right. So putting this kind of together, what I think is that, like, because what you just described is more or less what, like, the Final Fantasy 14 thing is what people think of when they're being afraid of what CCP is going towards, right? But
So,
rather than giving us a story that we just get to be a part of, it's more like catalysts, things happening
yeah,
that people
exactly.
can react to. So rather than giving us a reaction, we can react however we want, but they're giving
Yeah.
us things to react to.
So Valamir says in chat, you have to follow the story as a mechanic in Final Fantasy. You don't have to RP as a warrior light. But yes, that's exactly what I mean. You do this one thing in your gameplay where you're the warrior of light because the game forces you to be the warrior of light, or else
Right.
you literally can't progress. And then you go to the residential district and go to your bar, and you can. I don't know who the warrior of light is. I am a simple drug dealer.
Yeah, while you're
Right?
doing what, but it doesn't matter what your RP is. While you're doing the mission, the main story quests, you are the warrior of light. You don't get
Yeah.
to choose beyond
But
like one or two options or something. It
in
doesn't do
Eve,
anything.
my character is who she is, whether she's fighting Perglavians, shooting people in low sec or null sec, or Pochven, or joining a wolf pack fleet and killing drifters, or joining a specter. And these are all things that people can be like, you did this, but you said this. That's hypocritical, right? Or things like that. You can say, if you say one thing and do another in gameplay, you get called out
It's true.
because the gameplay is actually a thing your character does in Eve. And that's like amazing to me. And it's not the only game that's ever done that. I started MMOs in Ultima Online, which was another sandbox style game. And what I did was what my character did there. And that's what I got used to. And I, I'm not saying I can't do it like other games do, but I really like my gameplay actually being part of my character.
So let's assume for a moment that you're not getting elected.
All right.
So this is your last chance to kind of say something. What is something that you feel that CCP is still missed out of all of this?
Out of all of the faction warfare
Yeah,
changes,
they've given you your whole post or whatever. Is there anything that you feel like? Is there any message? It's like, if I don't get elected, the one thing I need you to know, the one thing like to keep in mind, the most powerful message or whatever. Like, what do they need to hear right now?
the most powerful message would be keep doing things like Flosiswin, and don't do things where the players the players feel like they had no choice, where they had no agency. A very important part of the Eve story that I love so much is that we write a lot of it, most of it.
Right.
Basically, CCP gives us the guidelines and we color as we like. And when we go outside of that formula, people get frustrated. And it's a good way to dodge that frustration by giving us the cool context and letting us do as we wish. And very importantly, if you have a conflict with multiple sides, make sure both sides get equal attention.
So your group goes in and out of faction warfare. Both groups that
Yes.
you've been in have spent their time going in and out of faction warfare.
Well, Pi was 100% faction warfare.
Oh, I thought there was times that Pi was not in faction warfare.
Pi left faction warfare after I left Pi. They're
Oh, fair
currently a
enough.
member of Lumen.
Got
Right?
it. Okay.
Right.
So, how much
So
of your time have you done like as a proper faction warfare pilot?
totally in militias between both of them,
Like out there
upwards of
fighting
9
in
years.
plexus. What?
Upwards of 9 years.
9 years.
My first up until 2015, I was more casual than I am now. But after 2016, I didn't play a lot. I played off and on, but I kind of burnt out during the tournament because of all the practice.
Right.
And then I came back in 2017 strong and started being a lot less casual.
So you've
As
you've basically been a militiaman the whole, more or less the whole time. You've had
I
breaks from
mean,
it, but
at this point, I'm a 12-year player.
oh, that's fair. Okay.
So 9 of 12 years totally in the militia now. Since I did it so long, I like EM how we do campaigns and we do a bunch of different stuff to keep things fresh. Like right now,
That's right. Electus Matari basically does the campaign system effectively, but internally.
yeah,
Are you part of
yeah,
that?
yeah. I'm in Alexis Matari. Well,
No, I mean like the group that did make that happen.
I mean, I'm one of the FCs, and I can pick a target. I can pick targets and bring it to the like Deebs and stuff. And if it looks good, I can ping place for it. Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I'm not the alliance leader. That's Deebs. My CEO is Elspeth. I am an FC, and I have the ability to go.
Got
Hey,
it.
we have these enemies over here. I'm gonna go shoot them. So yeah.
Got it. So a campaign basically, what does a campaign mean in that context?
All right. So Electus Matari is obviously Min Matar Loyal Alliance. So, and we do largely things that support the Min Matar in some way. And we always keep our eyes out for things that are in this vein. Right now, we're currently in some high sec war decks with some groups that are we're burning down a industrial group in Republic space, and we've been fighting those at the moment. Right before these, we were in the militia for the Minmatar. Before that,
Oh, I see. So it's like
yeah,
you're always in a war. It's just sometimes you leave the faction war to go do a high sec war and not have the two like
well, yeah.
mess with each other.
Sometimes our target is the faction war. Sometimes our target is
Right.
the high sec war, the
That makes
Pochven
sense.
war, Great Wildlands, things that are Republic connected that would be good, helpful to the Minmatar. It's not always faction warfare. A lot of like that's a regular reoccurring one. Usually we plug militia time in when we have nothing else on our plate that
Makes
needs
sense.
immediate attention. It's a really good like okay, we have no obvious war deck prospects. We have no obvious targets in low or null or anything. Okay, militia.
What is going on in Pochven that most people don't realize?
You mean like storyline wise,
I
where
mean, yeah. I mean, like
people
we hear the
there's
same
still
stuff from
people still
everybody. There's the
there's
common knowledge about Pochven. What's going on beyond that?
I mean, are you talking about the players fighting or like the context of the storyline? Because
Either.
like
It's
I
just
think
tell us a
with
little
the
bit about Pochven that you don't think that most people know about.
so I think most people know about the flashpoints being a very good
Yeah.
source of content with being both profitable and driving fights, and I think that could be used around other areas of space. But what I think people don't realize is there's still a lot of people stuck on these planets who, and I think the conflict between Edencom still being in Pochven, trying to find ways to both get people off the planets and off of and and fight with the Triglavians over the conquered systems are could also be used as another driver of content in the region. Like I think that there should there should have been like when Pochven first came out, I think there were a lot more people on the Edencom side who were interested in it than are now because of how the thing ended.
Right.
And I think what people don't realize is it could have been a lot more destructive off the bat if they made if they had accounted for an organized Edencom side.
Right. Yeah. It, it's unfortunate. Um, shoot, I had a question, but then I just lost it. Oh well.
Yeah.
Uh, so there was actually a question that got asked earlier in chat that I'm going to kind of steal. Why should you be on the Imperium ballot?
I mean, I'm not a Imperium director of any sort, so
Sure, but I mean, like last year they
last year
put
I landed on the Poppy ballot somehow.
right, but like
But I mean,
Satonia was. So why should they put you on?
for any of those big block entries, um, I think that it's important for people to see Eve as not just the game they play, but the game we all play. And people who live in different areas of space more or less play different games. And I think it's overall good for the ecosystem for everybody to have a balance of perspectives on the CSM. So I think even from a big block context, somebody who understands the game from another perspective being on the CSM is a positive thing for everybody, even for them.
Good. All right. Fair enough. I guess to flip it around, why should a high sec person vote for you?
I actually, like I said, we're currently in a high sec war. I know how the Jang high sec mechanics work. A lot of people don't. So if it depends on what a high sec person wants. Like
A
there's
mission
not one
runner
type.
or Abyss
There's
runner?
not one type of person in high sec. If it's
Sure.
somebody who just
Industrialist.
wants gangs to end, I'm not the candidate to vote for because I think gangs are an important part to the economy, right?
Fair enough.
But I think that a lot of people, even some people maybe who are very knowledgeable about the game in so many other contexts, I think one of the least understood things in the game is high sec war mechanics. And I have experience with that, right? Because groups do a lot of BS things in both high sec war mechanics and like faction warfare mechanics within high sec, like how to camp the enemy hub. I know and understand how all these things work. And
Right.
so
I
think that's motivation for a high secker.
That's a fair point.
Oh, look, somebody says in chat, EM killed the multi-boxers from Pain. Yeah, Pain and Compliance is one of the groups we've been fighting in high sec because they came after Damfam.
Do you support lore accurate skins in the game? And as a follow up, yeah, I guess.
So define lore accurate skins. Like I think that things in the game should be lore accurate, but I think there's a lot of room for stuff to exist within a universe.
Yeah, I think that the lore is a lot broader than a lot of people realize.
Like for example, let's take an Amar ship, a Harbinger. Would there ever be a Minmatar corporation that might use it? Yeah, I think that would happen all the time in like the actual universe.
I got it. I figured out my question. Sorry.
Yeah.
I've been dancing around for the last minute. Okay. So you are an old school role player. You know, you joined right around the time of like Templar 1 and everything, where a lot of the role players got mad.
Yeah.
How has scarcity been for you and yours?
The scarcity, I feel like from our perspective, we had pretty decent ways to fund ourselves through the scarcity. Very few of the ways we had trouble making money. Very few of the ways we made money were super heavily impacted. Like in the invasions, at the end of the invasions, like in that week before Pochven, we farmed world arcs so hard. People had some money to coast on for a while. and we have like internal industry
Right.
to like build a lot of the like ships we have, and we whelp all the time, the typhoons.
Well,
Um,
a lot of people got hurt by scarcity. We
yeah,
got told at the end of the year scarcity was going to end. With that came waste, which a lot of people see as basically, uh, I guess, I don't know the right phrase for it, but one step forward, one step back, more or less. Um, and then we get told to wait till FanFest. Nullsec doesn't even get sites or anything like that. CCP is currently, I would say, in a crisis of trust. There's always been kind of an antagonism between the player base and CCP, but what I find fascinating is, at least in my opinion, if CCP just delivers on what they said that they're going to do, people are going to be really, really happy. And this is, I've talked to a lot of people like from all walks of life, and they seem to agree, but they don't trust that CCP will do it. So being the fact that you've been part of these organizations or these people that CCP has lost the trust of, how does CCP rebuild that trust?
I mean, you already said it in the question. They need to do the things that they say they're going to do. Like a lot of the role players have been upset about a number of things going back several years now. Like
Right.
the invasions pissed off a lot of people. Uh, faction warfare not getting attention just disappointed a lot of people, and a lot of like the cycle where like going all the way back to the incursions where like external force is does invasion, uh, empires fight, event ends, no iteration on it since,
Right.
because we had Sancha, Drifters, Triglavians, and it seems like the same sort of thing over and over again,
Right.
and a lot of people are tired of that.
Well,
Um,
what brought
but
this to my mind was the whole thing
yeah,
about Pochven and Edencom that you said. That like if they had done this originally, then there would have been more people. But because of the way it
yeah.
was done, now there's less people in Edencom. How do we get those people to love again?
Well, honestly, it started with the apology at FanFest, and a lot of people actually took that really well for the Edencom specific situation. But in general, they need to communicate more because a lot of times we get left in the dark for extended periods of time, and then something comes completely out of left field that makes no sense, and like something that usually could have been avoided, whether it be uh, mechanical changes following scarcity that people weren't on board with, or whether it be the end of the Pochven campaign. It's a common like lack of
But
communication
but
that ultimately ends up in everybody feeling frustrated, I think.
is it really just a matter of start doing it right, and then people will come back,
Yes, I
or
think so. So like let me tell you about my first MMO again, Ultima Online. So Ultima Online, when it started, it was like Eve. You had multiple servers on like Eve, but you played on a server and you could go out of town and PvP one another, or not PvP one another, and you could be a criminal or you could be like a friendly miner or whatever you wanted to be. And then one day, in order to try to make it less harsh and to get more people to come into the game, they split the world into two worlds called Feluca and Tremel. And one of them was a PvE world where you couldn't kill each other out of town. And the other one was the old PvP enabled world that we were used to. Well, it split the community. The PvEers had uh, their version of server. The PvPers had their version of the server, and you could cross over between the two, but people wouldn't really go do anything other than look for people to kill in the PvP area.
Right.
And the game died.
Why would you go
I
to the
mean,
PvP area
the game
if you don't
died.
want a PvP?
So
Yeah.
by trying to make it more accommodating for people who don't currently play the game, you just push off people who do and you lose your niche. Like Eve has survived as long as it has because it has a niche in the market where it does stuff that no other game does. And if it tries, like you can bring more people into the game, but if you try to be other games and you're just going to push more people out and you're never going to really do the other game stuff as well as the other games, I think.
Right. But at the same time, though, do you feel that there are wrongs that need righting?
I feel like most of the wrongs that need righting are content that hasn't been iterated on in a long time, like faction warfare, like incursions, like non-faction warfare, low sec. A lot of stuff is put down and forgotten about, and I feel like that is the wrong that needs to be righting instead of new invasion, new invasion, new invasion. Let's get back and refurbish everything that hasn't been touched for so long. Missions are from like 2003 still. Like
Right.
the standing system is as old as the game itself and like completely ridiculous.
So that's actually an interesting question because so CCP now has their Nodi tool that allows them to build new sites and new experiences and stuff. And it's been used in the Air MPE, and they're now doing it on the career agents. And then
The new NP is fantastic.
Yes. They've talked about after doing the career agents that they would like to do missions, but there's also, a desire to do new things. And so it's a balance between the two. How would you strike the balance between spending our dev effort to make new sites and new experiences, new missions using these tools versus refurbishing the old ones, reconstructing them in these?
I mean, I think that the overall priority right now needs to be getting a lot of the old stuff up to speed. Like somebody says in chat, missions as they are need to die. Yeah, we need completely new, a completely new, like they need to be completely brought into the modern decade, right? And I think that that should be 80, 90% of the focus right now.
What do you say to the people that like missions the way they are and don't want it to be needlessly more complicated? They like the fact that they can just chill out and
I mean, I'm not
rescue the damsel again.
I'm not suggesting that missions aren't gonna like high sec missioning isn't still gonna be chill, but like as it stands, it could be way more fun even for them. Like it can still be chill in high if you're doing like level fours in high sec,
Fair
but
enough.
be more modern.
Right. They can make it more interesting without making it harder. So if you just, bringing a paladin will overwhelm it then just as much as it overwhelms it now.
Like yeah, and yeah, I'm not saying high sec missions should suddenly be the same difficulty as tier 6 abyssal or whatever,
Right.
right?
So you think that so you're suggesting that missions should be a higher priority over different things.
Well, I feel like stuff that hasn't been iterated on and improved should be a higher priority over newer stuff. So missions are an example of one older thing.
Wouldn't the counter argument be missions already exist? So now we're going to spend 40 units of work to have the same thing. Whereas I could spend those 40 units of work and double the number of missions / sites we have.
Yeah, but then you're gonna have situations like
Let's not say double,
peop-
1.5, because it's harder to make new ones than refurbish old ones. Sorry, go on.
then you're gonna have like situations like where people skip all the old ones in order to get to the new ones and stuff, and that's just like a pain. Like
What I mean, like a whole new system, call it like that. Not necessarily even mix them together, but like, you know, there's now missions, which is the old system, and the brokerage service, which is the new system, and you just get things from there. Or maybe these new sites are just new escalations and new anomalies for us to run into.
I mean, new escalations and new anomalies would be iterating on anomalies, which are another thing that need help, right? So I'm not against that,
I see. So
right?
all the systems already exist. So whatever you're doing, like, but that's I guess what I meant, because like new
Like,
anomalies, because that's what CCP has kind of
yeah,
suggested that they were going to do in like nullsec, for example, right?
new anomalies.
That like the anomalies would escalate or something like that. That anomalies as they are now would continue to be anomalies as they are because people like that. But there'd be new optional things that might spin off of that or come from somewhere else. Now, obviously, we didn't see anything about that from FanFest. So I don't know where that went, but that's what they kind of talked about.
Here's one thing about like because we've kind of been sidetracked on missions for a while, but they are part of the living universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you could, if you would modernize the mechanics, you could do stuff like have an integrated system where like the mission agents are telling you, okay, bring supplies to this area, and then like so like the Minmatar Republic are like, okay, bring supplies over here. For the distribution mission people, bring the supplies over to the front line of the war zone, and then maybe the PvPers, maybe then it changes something with like how the front line and the operational command systems give bonus to their side. So like the enemy's side is going to try to start intercepting the haulers, and maybe like the PvPers have to come and fight the enemy who are trying to intercept their haulers and such. Like you could basically tie the universe together in a way that like missions aren't really tied into the rest of the universe right now if you would update them,
Right.
because like I feel like the empires wouldn't have one goal, right? They'd have ultimately like, okay, we want the militia to take this system. We need people to bring supplies over here. We need people to kill security missions, pirates over here, right? Like you could
Right.
tie all of these things together so that
Yeah, and it
you're
sounds like
actually
that's what the
running into
allegiance
other
system is
players.
kind of playing towards with the
So like
fact.
a lot of players start Eve, they do their career missions, they get pointed to doing missions, and then they spam level ones for a couple days until they get bored out of their minds because it takes a new player quite a long time to move up to like level twos and then level threes. And they don't even know if the other stuff outside of missions exists because missions don't lead them to anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
And
and this
in
is
a
all stuff
modern
that,
system,
and this is basic.
in
Sorry.
a modern system, the missions could not only give you the option of advancing in missions, but lead you down other paths for you to explore. And then maybe you find, I don't like missions. I actually really had a rush when that enemy side tried to camp in my hauler and I escaped.
Yeah.
And I want to try to go fight people because that seems fun because now I'm an adrenaline junkie like that idiot Arsia.
Or I didn't get away, and now I'm
Right?
mad.
Yeah, I want to get revenge for my Sunesis or whatever.
All right, I'm running really low on time myself, but I do want to give you a lot of this stuff, especially the angst about like the arcs and all that stuff, is the idea that like, well, just the intimidation of getting into the lore, right? Like, there's a lot of people that don't even realize that there is a lore. They like to deny it. They like to think of it as something that they shouldn't have to pay attention to. I think that you could say that CCP is doubling down on the idea that their lore is interesting. So convince the audience to get deeper into the lore?
I mean, I'm going to actually pull a 180. If you don't like the lore, you don't have to give a shit about it. Like, I think that's fine.
That's fair, but why
Right?
should they? Like you know they don't.
I mean, I personally find it gives me motivation to do things I wouldn't otherwise do, fight battles I wouldn't otherwise fight, put myself or sometimes put myself at a disadvantage when I wouldn't otherwise do that. Um, I think it when you are interested in lore and role playing and have objectives that don't always make practical sense from a standpoint of how to play game best, you lead to a lot more interesting situations, in my opinion, than when you just min max. And you can still like RP and pretty heavily min max, do good fleet comps, do good fleet, like good fleet doctrines and all that.
Right.
But like you have motivations and goals that you wouldn't otherwise think of, and that still leads to interesting situations a lot of times.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people aren't going to care if some war deck group is burning down the Republic, right? Because we're not some high sec industry corp, right? But we care, and we actually had a like a an amazing fight in Bay the other day, right? Like, and how often do you hear an amazing fight in high sec? Like almost never. Like the culmination fight of the Becca, which was another high sec war, was like 150 people on 4 sides on grid in high sec. Like these are things you don't ever see in any other situation.
Right. I would say also that understanding, like, getting into the lore for the most part is more about understanding the context of the universe rather than, like, it's not like World of Warcraft or something like that where you're reading the books or anything like that. There is technically that, but really it's more about,
Don't read
like,
the
just
books; they're bad.
it's more about understanding, like, there's a lot of people that feel like there's a lot of, like, lack of purpose or anything, but what I find
They give you purpose.
most rewarding is how much connection to things that I find, either to real life things through use of language or icons, or clever ways in which the universe is actually, like the game actually reflects the universe, et cetera, et cetera. So I find it very rewarding for that. But you have 10 minutes
I have
or
10
so.
minutes.
Yeah, this is. Do you have anything that you want to discuss before we wrap this up?
All right.
Oh, shoot. Hold on. Never mind. Hold on. I've got
Never
one
mind.
last question.
All right.
Most important question.
Cat ears, yes.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Your time.
So in FanFest, I brought a pair of cat ears. I am totally trained cat ears. Cat ear train. Woo woo.
It is.
All
It's a
right.
formality with you, I understand, but it's for the video.
Cat ears actually in the lore. Glende body modders exist.
Yeah,
So there you go.
absolutely.
All right.
So, but do you have anything that you want to we haven't gone over that you want to stress or talk about before we wrap this up?
All right. So I'm just gonna again stress that I think that Eve of the Living Universe and Eve of the Harsh Sandbox can be the same thing. Um, a lot of people are worried about the idea of Eve of the Living Universe going down theme park directions. And I think if handled right, that doesn't have to be the case at all. I think that having a sandbox full of catalysts will lead to a more dynamic and exciting sandbox for all of us and allow for more sand to be put into that sandbox. Um, After all, we, as a CCP developer said, Eve is 30 games in a trench coat. It's not one game. And the living universe is kind of what connects all of those of us who play this game in our various styles together. And I think it's more interesting when we run up against one another and we get exposed to one another than when we're all separated. I think that there's been a lot of things that have went kind of in the wrong direction, like those signatures that are capped to an amount of ships that can go inside of them in LoSec, which
Right.
makes them more safe than abyssals, right? Because you don't pop out in a predictable space, and you can't bring another ship inside. And I don't want even 10 years to be a game where the only PvP is the arena you queue for, and all of the sites have a hard cap on how many ships you can get into them, and all those sort of things. So I think that the, with proper guidance, that the living universe can put more of that sand in the sandbox, and even the harsh sandbox will continue to exist and be stronger for it.
Nice. Well said. I think that it's important to stress, like, just simply telling CCP don't do it at this point isn't going to go anywhere, right? We are committed to the path at this point, like it or not. So having a bunch of people in the CSM whose only feedback about any of these ideas that they've talked about is just faction warfare is not important and don't do any of this and we don't want the lore, like, that's just going to make it so that nobody's talking about anything, right? CCP knows that position. If that's all they are saying, then that's not doing very much good. So we need people in the CSM who actually understand at least what CCP's attempting to do and has done a lot of thought as to how it can be done well. I think that that is an important voice to have on the CSM Council. And obviously you have plenty of connections. We haven't even mentioned this, but you're a streamer and whatnot. So, probably like me, you speak to your audience and get exposed to a whole bunch of ideas there too.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, having somebody on the CSM like Arsia is going to be incredibly important because she's speaking their language this year, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I think that's probably the best reason, in my opinion, that's a very strong reason to have you on the CSM more than anything else. Like, more than the incumbency, more than, all that kind of stuff. The fact that we need somebody at the table who's willing to talk past all of that angst and help CCP actually deliver a good product.
Yeah. I agree. I am great.
Yeah, pretty cool. No, all right. Well, I think that should about do it, Arsia. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you all for watching. If you're checking this out on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're watching this on the playlist, just hang out. We're going to go on to the next one. Post any questions for her down below or in her forum post, which is in the doobly-doo down below in the at the YouTubes. But either way, it's important to vote, and it's important to become an informed electorate, because that is how we have an effective CSM. And that is important to us because the CSM is only as good as we make it. So, with that said, once again, thank you, Arsia, for coming. And I have been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden. And until next time, we'll see you in space.